Welcome to episode 9, Is Weed Dangerous? A couple things to start off. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer, and I haven't studied cannabis in a scientific setting. The information I'm using is what's available to public knowledge and from scientific studies I've looked over. Okay, so, can cannabis kill you? Sure, and here's a couple scenarios I've envisioned where cannabis could kill you. First one, you take a fat bong rip and get really high. And then you decide that donuts sound amazing, naturally. Oh, also you're diabetic, and you tear through that box of donuts. But because you're so high, you forget to take your insulin, and you die from a combination of diabetes and cardiac arrest after your 36th donut. The paramedics claim they've never seen a bigger smile on a dead man's face. Scenario 2. You work at a cannabis processing facility, and you work around these great big vats of cannabis oil. You pass the tanks every day, but you can't take it anymore. You have to know what it's like to swim in that godly golden lake. Without a second thought, you dive into the vat, clothing and all. It's eerily similar to that scene in Beer Fest where landfill drowns in beer. You get weighed down by the viscous liquid, filling your shoes and such. And they try to fish you out, but it's too late. You were stoned and an incompetent swimmer, drowning in almost record time. Then your body hardens over as the oil dries, leaving you as this bizarre shatter version of Han Solo on Jabba the Hutt's wall. Okay, that's all for the scenarios. But to get real about what you're trying to figure out in regards to cannabis is that people don't overdose on cannabis like they do with other drugs. And how do we know this? Well, basically, there are 0 recorded cases from someone ODing on cannabis. Now, that's not at all proof that cannabis is safe, but it provides an indication of where things stand relatively. Because pure THC can definitely kill a human, but so can any substance at a certain quantity, whether it be hydrochloric acid or plain water. There have been a handful of deadly cases in recent years that point the blame at cannabis, but ones that singly identify it can be counted by hand. For example, I've linked an article called Marijuana Overdose is Not a Myth, which uses a CDC database to categorize death certificates in the US. The article talks about death from cannabis, but only returns cases of multiple causes of death. When searching by underlying cause of death, the CDC Wonder database yields no results for cannabis. According to the U.S. National Institute on Drug Abuse, there have been no reports of teenagers or adults dying from cannabis alone. Now, when you compare that to something like opioids or alcohol, there are thousands upon thousands of conclusive reports. And comparatively, alcohol can kill you at roughly 2 to 3 times its intoxicating dose, meaning if it takes you 4 drinks to become intoxicated, it could kill you at 10. With cannabis, the amount needed to cause death is scales larger. Its toxicity is more akin to something like aspirin or caffeine. The amount is disputed, of course, being researched haphazardly and in a non-comprehensive manner, not to mention you can't just administer THC until it kills someone. They definitely don't encourage that in academia, and there isn't empirical data from widespread use. As well, the factors like administration of crude herb versus pure THC isolate, administration route like smoking or intravenous delivery, i.e. needles, which, by the way, is not a thing cannabis users do. It's purely scientific administration, so stop conflating other drugs just because the word drug scares you. Okay, moving on, with factors like representative model, as in rodents or primates, these factors muddy the distinctive waters. But even the most conservative estimates of cannabis toxicity are around 30 milligrams per kilogram, meaning about 2 grams of THC for a 150-pound person. And even if you had a high-potency strain of, say, 25% THC, in a perfect conversion, because you lose THC during combustion, but pretending perfect conversion, 8 grams of cannabis, which would be around 24 joints by a federal study on typical size, or 16 for half gram, which is pretty typical at a dispensary. By average bowl size, if you were using a pipe, it would be 32 full bowls all by yourself. And I'm not talking throughout the course of the day, but all together, because the lethal dose is gauged by amount in your bloodstream. And this level peaks roughly 15 minutes after inhalation. Studying blood levels summarized that, quote, THC levels increased rapidly, peaked prior to the end of smoking, and quickly dissipated, end quote. So to put it plainly, in case this isn't coming across, it would take an insane amount of cannabis to get you to a 50-50 chance of death. This is not an amount you could accidentally smoke. It's something you would have to willfully and forcefully undergo. As a paper titled Sudden Unexpected Death Under Acute Influence of Cannabis anecdotally describes, a soldier failed to commit suicide by smoking cannabis. He purportedly spent 4 days in a coma, but claimed that others had effectively used the method. This paper provides a perspective from those claiming cannabis's deadliness. It goes on to describe the cases of 2 relatively young and physically healthy men. The first example concluded that death occurred, quote, most possibly due to cardiac arrhythmia with cardiac hypertrophy and consecutive stasis-associated thrombus formation of a small cardiac vessel, end quote. And the second, quote, due to acute global cardiac failure, end quote. The bottom line is that they both likely died of heart complications, and both of them had cannabis in their system, described as an acute influence, meaning while they were high. These are claimed to be the first cases of suspected fatal cannabis intoxications. However, to differentiate, these men didn't die of THC toxicity. They didn't overdose on cannabis. They died from heart issues likely caused by smoking. Now, that is a side effect associated with smoking cannabis and other products, a potential increase of heart rate, cardiac output, blood pressure, and carboxyhemoglobin. So if you have any heart conditions, maybe consider that before getting all Puff the Magic Dragon. Giving you this breakdown about the true toxicity of cannabis isn't to say there aren't side effects to getting ridiculously high. For example, I once had a friend who, being from a country where cannabis wasn't easily available, he was excited to be experiencing it in the US. He started smoking a lot, but didn't really mess with other forms of cannabis. One night he messaged me asking if 80 milligrams is a lot for an edible. I hoped he meant 8, as 5 to 10 milligrams of THC is considered a normal dose for edibles. He did not. He and some friends had split an almost 300 milligram edible chocolate bar, not really knowing the right dosage or how much each person had received. He was relatively okay, just way high for a long time, while his buddies were throwing up from it. But I'm not surprised. At 8 times the normal dose, I wouldn't even touch an edible at half that strength, which is another aspect worth acknowledging. Cannabis from an oral source, as opposed to inhalation, has different effects, compounds, and absorptions. Although acute toxicity is uncommon in non-pediatric patients, it is becoming and will continue to come to medical attention as more and more new users get acquainted and new products become available. It would be naive to think everyone will do research before shoveling candy down their gullets. And when they end up at the hospital, they are likely to come with, quote, hyperemesis, behavioral problems, or an emergency such as bronchospasm, end quote. So throwing up, being scared, and breathing trouble with psychiatric symptoms like depersonalization, fear of dying, irrational panic, and paranoid ideas. Then there's the vast entity of chronic use, which has only been marginally touched upon, with reports of, quote, amotivational syndrome, a loss of energy and will to work, respiratory disorders, and cyclic vomiting syndrome, aka cannabinoid hyperemesis, end quote. This enforces the responsibility that comes with each state's legalization. Many people treat cannabis products like other food, and they aren't being careful. it scares me to think about people not taking proper measures and just like leaving those products out near animals or children. And there are cases that have made the news. I have two in mind, like my friend's event. One with a police officer consuming cannabis he confiscated, and the other with a reporter who didn't read the packaging and ate an entire edible chocolate bar. They both were green to cannabis and experienced uncomfortable highs, thinking they were going to die. Neither did. So, to summarize, ingesting large amounts of THC can be uncomfortable. It can make you physically ill and potentially have pulmonary or cardiac complications, but you're not going to accidentally overdose. Okay, now because this is such a big topic, I'm going to pause it here, but I'll pick up with a part 2 next time with a discussion on addiction and some basic steps to being a safer stoner.